Okay, today we're going to talk about nouns. And as you learned back in first grade, nouns are people, places, and things. In English, all nouns are classified as he, she, or it, masculine, feminine, or neuter. However, in Spanish, there is no such thing as it. There is only masculine and feminine. For example, a table, we would say in English, it. The table needs to be cleaned. It needs to be cleaned. However, in Spanish, we must identify that the table is feminine. I don't know why she has a mane, but she does. Alright, likewise, chair is not it. I don't sit on the chair because it is comfortable. I sit on the feminine chair because the feminine thing is comfortable. Alright, it's very important to pay attention to this in Spanish. The book is masculine. What makes it masculine? I don't really know, but it's masculine, and it's very important to pay attention to that. So, when dealing with nouns in Spanish, you must pay attention to whether something is masculine or feminine, and then singular or plural. You must pay attention to gender and plurality. And this is going to come back again and again. You have to pay attention to whether something is masculine or feminine, and everything is masculine or feminine, and then if there's one or more than one item. Okay, so the question is, how do you know if a noun is masculine or feminine? Computer, how are you going to know that it's computadora, feminine, and therefore be able to match everything that you have to match with that feminine noun? Spanish is very complicated when it comes to these things. Everything has to match in a sentence. And so how do you know whether a noun, such as the classroom, is masculine or feminine? There are a few ways that can be helpful. Some things you just have to memorize, but some things there are some clues that you can use to help identify. First of all, if the noun refers to something that is male, such as a man, then it's going to be a masculine noun. It's going to be el hombre. And if it's a male cat, it's going to be a male noun. Whereas, likewise, if you're referring to a woman, it's going to be a female noun. However, if the word ends in an O, it is going to be a masculine noun also. So chico, it refers to a boy, but it ends in an O, so you know that it's referring to a boy. Because chica, ending in an A, is referring to a girl. So niño would be referring to a boy. Niña would be referring to a girl. So you're not going to want to call the little boy niña. You're going to want to call him niño. All right. Also, pasajero would be a male passenger, and pasajera would be a female passenger. We have to say, in English, we have to point out, like, if you can't just refer to a passenger, but if you want to make the point that it's a male or a female, you have to say, yeah, I was sitting next to this male passenger, or I was sitting next to this female passenger. In Spanish, all you do is you change the O to an A to make it feminine. Right? Also, some nouns, usually referring to people who do things, like matador means killer. You guys know a matador, but matador is somebody who kills, a killer. But in Spanish, it usually ends in an OR. All right, so a male somebody who does something, like a male driver, the male bus driver would be conductor, whereas a female bus driver, you're going to add an A to that, and it's going to be conductora. Profesor would be a male person who teaches. Profesora would be a female teacher. However, there are some complicated things like things ending in ista, like turista would be a tourist, taxista is going to be a taxi driver, racista would be somebody who's racist. So lots of things end in ista, like barista. I don't think that's a Spanish word, but it ends in ista. Is again somebody who does something, and even though it ends in an A, you have to notice that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a female, but if you say that it's male using el or los or un, as we'll talk about later, then it makes it male. So yeah, we'll talk about the articles later, but just realize that ista can be male or female depending on who you're referring to in the article that you use. Alright, so referring to things that are obviously male or female, that's pretty easy. But what do you do with random objects that in English they don't have a gender, they're just neutral, it. But in Spanish you have to have a gender, masculine or feminine. How do you tell the difference? And so there, as I already mentioned, there are a few things that can be helpful to identify this. First of all, masculine nouns, things that are identified as male, even though to us they're identified as it, usually end in O. And so, there's a joke about you just add an O on something and it makes it Spanish, like I'm going to put my homework O in the box O. No, that's stupid, but masculine nouns often do end in an O, which tell you that it's masculine. All right. Also, for feminine nouns, they usually end in an A, although it's not always the case, but a lot of times things ending in A are feminine, such as la cosa, la escuela, la grabadora, la maleta, la palabra. I don't know why why that's feminine, why a suitcase is feminine, why a tape recorder is feminine, why a school is feminine, or the thing is feminine. But we identify them as feminine, right? But you got to pay attention because usually things ending in MA are also feminine. I'm sorry, things ending in MA are masculine. So if you looked at el problema, you would see that that ends in an A, and therefore it's you would think that it would be feminine, but it's really MA, which makes it masculine. So things ending in MA are usually masculine. El problema, el programa, those are masculine. So just keep that in mind. All right. Likewise, things ending in S, and if it's not plural, it's usually masculine. So we're going to talk in a second about how to make things plural, more than one. But usually, if it's not plural, but it ends in an S, then it would be masculine. Right? Such as autobús and el país, the country and the bus. Alright, things ending in ción, those are all feminine. So lección, the lesson, that's feminine. La conversación, that would be feminine. Also, like computers, computation, computación, that would be a feminine noun. Alright. Also, things ending with the ending dad. Remember, it's not dad, like with a hard D, but you kind of make it almost a TH, dad. So those are going to be feminine. So nacionalidad, the nationality, that's going to be feminine. Comunidad, that's going to be feminine as well, ends in the dad. Okay, although you are listening to this lecture, it's always a good idea to read the lesson in the book as well, because it highlights things that might not stand out just from hearing me talk. For example, the gender of nouns that refer to non-living things cannot be determined by foolproof rules. Instead, you should memorize the gender of each noun you learn, okay, or at least look for exceptions as you learn your vocab, all right? And so we'll talk about the articles in a minute, but el is masculine, la is feminine. So you look up here, autobus is el autobus because it's masculine. And nacionalidad would be la nacionalidad because it's feminine. The autobus, the nationality, right? But remember that I mentioned that in Spanish you really need to pay attention to whether things are masculine or feminine and singular or plural, right? So be looking for that a little bit later. But going back to the thing about memorizing the gender, there are exceptions to the rules. And so mapa ends in an A, and it's not an MA. Remember that MA things are usually masculine, but this just has an A. So it seems like it should be la mapa, but it's el mapa. Also, dia would be masculine, even though it ends in an A. Looks like it should be feminine, but it's not. So we'll be talking about adjectives later, but you don't say buenas dias, you say buenos dias, because dia is masculine, and therefore bueno, good, has to match that, and has to be buenos dias rather than buenas dias. And we'll talk about that later. Okay, hand ends in an O. It looks like it should be masculine, but it's actually feminine. So wash the hands. There'd be lávese las manos, even though it's masculine. It wouldn't be los manos, but las manos. Okay, so the next question is, how do you make nouns plural? We know that nouns, all nouns are either masculine or feminine, but the question is, how do you say more than one book? We know that book is libro. How do we say books? All right. So it's a little similar to English, but there are a couple of things that you have to pay attention to. First of all, you have to ask if the word ends in a vowel or a consonant. As you know, vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and consonants are anything other than that, such as D, Z, C, M, etc., etc. Okay, so if the word ends in a vowel, you just add an S. For example, chico ends in an O. So to make, chico means boy. To make it boys, you just add an S. So chico and chicos. Girl would be chica, and to say girls, more than one, you would say chicas. Carro means car, ends in an O, so it's masculine. Although at this point that doesn't really matter. But we want to make it more than one car. Ends in a vowel, we're just going to add an S. Alright? If it ends in a consonant, you're going to add an ES. For example, comunidad, community, ends in a consonant. To say communities, you'd add an ES. So in English, we'd pronounce this comunidades, but in Spanish, it's comunidades. Comunidades. You pronounce every letter. Okay. Another one would be, well, ending with a Z. A common one might be lapis, one of your vocab words. Okay. So the word is pencil. We want to say pencils. Ends in a consonant, so we're going to add an ES. However, note this carefully. You never have a ZE next to each other in Spanish. You never have a ZE next to each other in Spanish. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that Z and we're going to change it to a C. Alright? So if it ends in a Z and you're making it plural, you're going to change the Z to a C and add ES. So another common word that ends with a Z is luz, which means light. So if we want to say, or light, or can also be electricity. If you want to say the lights ends in a consonant, you're going to add ES, but you can't have a ZE in Spanish. And so you're going to change the Z to a C and then add your ES. Okay? So far we've learned that nouns, which are people, places, or things, in Spanish must be masculine or feminine, and we've kind of learned how to differentiate, hopefully, between the nouns, although you do need to kind of memorize some of them. And we have learned how to make nouns plural. Right now we're going to talk about how to say the or a. Alright? And so these are called articles when you use something that refers to a noun like this. So we have what we call definite articles, and definite articles refer to definite, specific things. For example, we would say the. Right? The is the definite article. So I would say the table. It's a specific table that I'm referring to. All right. We also have indefinite articles, which would be definite. We also have indefinite articles, which refer to a person, place, or thing that's not specific. So I need a student to help me with this project. All right. Or I need a place to sit, rather than somebody took the spot that I was sitting in. The spot would be definite. A seat would be indefinite. All right. So indefinite obviously is not specific, and in English it would be a, or if it's preceding vowel, it would be an. And then if you have more than one, so I need some students to help me, you might say some, for more than one. Alright, so remember that I've told you that in Spanish you always have to pay attention to whether something is masculine or feminine, and then singular or plural. Alright, so you have to pay attention to the gender and the plurality. So if we want to say the, and we're talking about something masculine, we're going to say el. So carro, it ends in an O, and it refers to, it's masculine. Alright, so if we want to say the car, we'd say el carro. If you're referring to something that's feminine, such as silla, which is chair, we want to say I broke the chair. Silla ends in an A, it's feminine. The chair would be la silla. Okay, so the masculine would be el, the feminine would be la. But we want to say the cars, more than one car. It would seem like we would say els carros, but that sounds a little bit stupid. So it's not el, but el becomes los. Now we know los from Los Angeles, right? Los Angeles literally means the angels, right? Which is why it's called the city of the angels, Los Angeles. All right. However, it's not in Spanish. It's not Los Angeles. The O makes an O sound, and so it's Los Angeles, the angels. All right. So el would be the for one thing that's masculine. If you're talking about more than one thing that's masculine, you're going to say los. Not las, but los. All right? The reason why it's important that you don't say las is because las is feminine plural for the, for more than one female objects. So mesa, table, that's feminine, ends in an A, and it's feminine. So the table would be la mesa, but we have more than one table. We want to say the tables. So we want to carry the tables in Mr. Fox's room. And so mesa ends in an A. You're going to put an S on that, and it's going to be mesas. And so with the, you kind of do the same thing. It's going to be las mesas. Okay? It's not grammatically correct to say la mesas. You need to say las mesas. And it wouldn't be grammatically correct to say los burrito. It's got to be los burritos or el burrito. It must match. Okay, you also have indefinite articles, which would be a or an, and more than one would be some. And again, you have to keep in mind whether you are talking about something that is masculine or feminine. And then, is there one thing, or is there more than one thing? Right? So if we're talking about a boy, a chico, we're going to say un. And it's kind of easy to remember this because it kind of looks like an. Right? So un chico would be one boy. One girl, girl being chica, would be una chica. Right? Una chica. Now then, if we're talking about more than one thing, that's masculine. Okay, it's not definite, it's not the, but some. So I need some books. Not I need the books, but I need some books. Okay. Now, if you follow the rule for making nouns plural, un would become unes, but that's not what we do. Instead, it's unos. Unos. Alright? Which is... anyway, that's important. Okay, so una would be a or an for something that's feminine. If we're talking about more than one thing, it'd be unas. So if we're saying a table, it'd be una mesa. Una mesa. But if we're talking about more than one table, some tables, we're going to say unas mesas. Unas mesas. There are some weird nouns, such as agua, which means water, that don't follow the rules. Agua, it ends in an A, and it's feminine. Right? However, you say el agua. El is the masculine definite article. It's saying the for something that is masculine. So it seems like you should say la agua, but you have la, that A sound, and then you have agua with the A sound. So rather than saying la agua, you say el agua. Right? But if you have more than one water, you wouldn't say la aguas, you'd say las aguas, and then you don't have the repeating A sound. It's las aguas, and so that's fine. So it's feminine, and it's kind of weird because in the singular it uses el, and in the plural it uses las. Another interesting word is fotografia, which means photograph or picture, your photos. Just like in English, we can say photograph, and then we can change. If we can make it short, we can abbreviate it and just say photo. So you can do the same thing in Spanish. Rather than saying fotografía every time, you just say la foto. Alright? But fotografía ends in an ia and is feminine, and photo, it ends in an O, but really it's just an abbreviation. So the real word is fotografía, but you've shortened it, taken off the ia on the end, and now it's an O, but it's really not masculine, it's still feminine. And so it's la foto. So even though it ends in an O, it's not el foto, but it's la foto. Okay, as you study Spanish, you'll notice that there are a lot of similarities between some Spanish words and English words. There are also a lot of similarities between Spanish words and Italian words, and Spanish words and French words. And the reason why is because Spanish is a Romance language. Now, Romance doesn't mean that, oh, not Romans, Romance. The Romance language doesn't mean that it's the language of love, although it very well may be. It just means that it's derived from Latin. And so the Romans spread their culture around the world, spread Latin, and in these different places that they conquered, Latin, although it didn't continue on, it did influence the language quite a bit. So Latin, actually Spanish, French, Italian, they're all Romance languages. So they have a lot of similarities. And then English has taken those words and put them in our vocabulary. And so there are a lot of cognates, right, which means words that have similar spellings and meanings. So you can see here there's different ones like administration, administración, animal, apartamento, cálculo, color, etc. that are pronounced a little bit differently, but they mean the same thing, and they're spelled very similar. Also, I was mentioning the word hotel. The H is silent. You don't pronounce that. It's just hotel. And it means hotel, even though it's exactly the same word as what we have. All right. However, you got to be careful because there are certain words that look the same that aren't the same at all. For example, carpeta means file, not carpet. Conductor means driver. I guess that's kind of similar to conductor. But éxito does not mean exit, but it means success. Fábrica is not fabric, but factory. Also, there are other ones, but one is sopa. It looks kind of like soap, but it actually means soup. So similar, but different enough. One that's really important is embarazada. Embarazada. So that looks like it means embarrassed, but it doesn't mean embarrassed. But if you use this, it will embarrass you. Embarazada means pregnant. So if you say yo soy embarazada, that means that I am pregnant, not I am embarrassed. So if you make a mistake in Spanish and you want to say I am embarrassed, don't say yo soy embarazada. And that's today's lesson.